I invited him in for a minute to borrow sugar. What he confessed while standing in my kitchen stopped me cold. This isn't a scandal or a secret from a lifetime ago. It's a soft, late afternoon unraveling that changed how I saw myself and the man next door. Stay with me. This one will make your heart ache and settle at the same time. Before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Are you watching from Boston, Phoenix, Charlotte, or somewhere smaller and cozy? I'd always love knowing where you're listening from. I still remember the light that afternoon. It slid across my kitchen table like a soft, slow hand, catching on the little chip in the blue ceramic mug I always kept for guests. My name is Betty. I'm 55, and this kitchen has become the map of my life, the place where I measure time by the way the sun moves across the linoleum, where my late husband's thermos still rests in the pantry, where recipe cards fold at the corners like old promises. I'd been making a pot of tea and sorting through a box of greeting cards when I heard Donald at the back gate. Donald lives next door in the duplex, 2 houses down from the road that smells like cut grass in July and wood smoke in October. He has a yard that seems to be forever fixing itself. A new row of marigolds here, a neatly trimmed hedge there, little acts of care that suit his hands. We traded small favors, borrowing a hammer, collecting mail on snowy days, swapping stories about the neighbor's porch light that has never seemed to work right. In our town, everyone knows everyone to some degree, and Donald and I had been those people who knew each other's birthdays, old college rivalries, and the brand of cereal each preferred. Not lovers, not dramatic, just 2 people who could sit on the stoop and complain about how fast the years went. That particular Thursday, I expected nothing more than the usual nod and quick chat. When the gate clicked open, I wiped my hands on a towel and went to the kitchen window. There he was, the same comfortable jacket, the same careful stride, except his shoulders seemed a little narrower that day, as if they were carrying something soft and heavy. He knocked on the back door, just twice, and then waited, like the kind of neighbor who knows the right amount of time to give between a knock and an entrance. "Betty?" he called, voice low and a little off. "Donald," I answered, and opened the door. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. Not the casual, "Got a minute?" but a question made of careful syllables. He looked older than his years for a moment there, and I felt that little tug of protectiveness and curiosity that older neighbors sometimes feel for one another. I stepped aside, and he crossed the threshold like he was crossing something else. Not only into my kitchen, but into a space where words live and sometimes surprise us. The kettle on the stove hissed like a small, expectant animal. My refrigerator held postcards and little magnets, photographs of grandkids, an invitation from the church luncheon, a coupon for the hardware store. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and tea. "Do you want some?" I asked, because offering tea felt like the only sensible response when anything felt off balance. "No," he said. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He pulled his cap off and smoothed his hair with a hand that had small, familiar scars from yard work and years of being careful with tools. I didn't come by for sugar. I came by to talk. If that's all right?" I nodded. The slow pulse behind my ear thrummed with a million tiny anticipations. There are confessions that fit in a phone call, the plumber's schedule, the neighbor's lost dog. Then there are confessions that insist on a kitchen table, a chair pulled in, the hum of a refrigerator, the ordinary things that give courage and shape to what needs to be said. We sat. He chose the chair closest to the window, where the light softened whatever expression he carried. He folded his hands as if tucking a letter into an envelope and then putting it aside rather than sending it. "You know how we've always said we look out for each other?" he began. "Yes," I said. My voice came out smaller than I expected. There was a certainty in the way he asked the question, as if he already knew the answer and was only giving me the courtesy of saying it out loud. That's never been just neighborly to me, Donald said. He took a slow breath, and the room seemed to tilt toward him, every household sound holding its breath along with me. Betty, I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. I didn't know how. I thought I'd be content with what we have, but it keeps growing inside me, and it felt wrong to keep it to myself. I felt the floor tilt, not dramatically, but like someone shifting a heavy painting on the wall. My first thought, absurd and sharp, was about the time he brought over his famous lemon bars for the block party and spilled powdered sugar all over his shirt. I laughed inwardly at the memory, a tiny, reflexive thing, because memory is how we keep our steadiness when something unfamiliar arrives. Donald, I said, because calling his name was an anchor. What do you mean? He looked like a man who had rehearsed and then let the rehearsal fall apart. I mean, he said slowly, that I'm in love with you. I have been for months, maybe longer. It didn't start because of anything big. It started because you lent me your wrench the winter the pipes froze, because you taught my granddaughter how to bake bread one Sunday after church, because you hummed the same hymn my mother did when you think no one's listening. It started because you are patient and funny, and because there is a depth to you I never expected. I've kept busy and made a life, but my life has been missing something honest and soft. I know your husband was. He stopped. Aware of his misstep, he pitched forward reflexively. That small courtesy, the admission and the immediate correction, was exactly the kind of thing that had always made me feel safe around him. He was not reckless. He was not trying to steal anything that wasn't freely given. He was giving me his truth and then stepping back to see if I would reach for it. My heart beat in a place I had forgotten it lived. I had been a wife. I had been a homemaker. I had been the woman who remembered appointments and anniversaries and where everything was kept. For 5 years now, since Jim's funeral, my days had settled into a gentle predictability. Church lunches, the book club in October, crossword puzzles with a pencil worn thin at the eraser. Loneliness had soft edges, the kind you can learn to live with. It didn't hurt in a way that broke you. It was the absent note in a song you once loved. Donald sat very still. The expression on his face was honest and unembellished, earnest, vulnerable, and profoundly respectful. I don't expect anything from you but the truth, he said. I don't want to rush you or unsettle you. I wanted you to hear me, and I wanted to be honest. If this isn't what you want, I will understand. I will keep being your neighbor, and I will keep fixing your porch light if you want me to. I felt myself freeze then, not in fear, not in shock, but in a sudden, enormous responsibility. Someone had offered me a piece of themselves in a kitchen with a blue mug and a kettle on the verge of boiling. Now I had to choose how to receive it. Part of me wanted to leap forward and close the distance with a wordless warmth. Another part of me wanted to step back, preserve the life I had built, and not complicate the rhythm of ordinary days. Donald, I whispered. The sound of my voice in that gentle space carried more weight than I expected. Why now? He looked down at his hands. Because watching you through the windows, hearing your laugh across the yard, it became clear to me that life was too short to leave things unsaid. Because I worry about the small things, you missing an appointment, not asking someone for help, and I thought, if I could be more than the man who waters your plants when you're away, maybe it would be a thing worth trying. Because I'm tired of pretending that this is only neighborly. There was a quiet dignity in his admission that surprised me. He wasn't a man of melodrama. He wasn't grand. He was simply a man who had realized he wanted to be seen for something deeper and was offering himself with no pressure, only hope. I sat with the confession like one might sit with a delicate china bowl, turned it over with my fingertips in my mind, looked for cracks, admired the glaze. I thought of Jim, his laugh, the way he used to leave notes on the counter, the summers we'd spent at the lake. I thought of the blank pages ahead of me and the ways they could be filled, with friends, with projects, with the slow rhythm of an ordinary life, or with something tender and surprising. "Donald," I said again, and this time I reached out before I could change my mind. My hand found his across the table. His palm was warm and rough in a way I recognized from years of shoveling snow and carrying groceries. He didn't squeeze. He simply turned his hand so our fingers laced without haste, like a promise rather than a demand. "Is this okay?" he asked, eyes steady on mine. "It's a lot," I said honestly, feeling the truth of it settle between us. "And I am surprised. I didn't expect this. But I'm listening." He let out a breath that sounded like both relief and fear. "That's all I wanted," he said, "to be heard." We sat in the quiet, the kettle finally letting out a long exhale as steam curled and found the ceiling. Outside, a neighbor's radio drifted through the open window, playing an old song that both of us had hummed in different years. The sunlight moved, and in that moving light the kitchen felt like an island where ordinary rules paused and something honest could take shape. I thought of the men my age we've lost and of the ones who remain, quiet, open, sometimes afraid. I thought of what it would mean to accept this new thing, comfort and companionship, and the tiny daily mercies of someone who cares. I thought of the responsibilities and the town's polite expectations and the sheer unexpectedness of having my heart both steadied and jolted in one afternoon. "There's something else," Donald said then, softer, and my breath went tight in my chest. For a moment I worried he might be telling me he was leaving town or had a secret that would undo this fragile possibility. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. My name was written on it, in his handwriting, sure and neat. "I wrote this the other night," he said. "If you want it, keep it. If not, burn it. I only want you to know how I feel, not to trouble you." His honesty felt like a hand extended across a bridge I hadn't planned to cross that day. I could imagine burning the note, letting the words curl into ember and ash and vanish. I could imagine keeping it somewhere safe, a new little thing among the recipe cards and grocery lists. For a long time I simply watched him, the way the sunlight made silver in his hair, the unassuming courage in the slope of his shoulders. When I unfolded the paper, I read a single sentence in his handwriting. "Betty, you are more than the life you keep. Maybe we could be more for each other, if you'd like. Donald." I read it twice. I felt an ache that was not pain so much as the soft recognition of possibility. My throat tightened, my eyes blurred with something that might have been the oddest mixture of fear and gratitude. Then Donald said, very plainly, "I'll give you time. I don't want to frighten you. I want to do this right." I looked at him, then down at the paper, then back at him, and felt the kitchen swell with what-ifs and small, hopeful angles. My hand tightened on his for just a second, a small answer that was neither yes nor no, but an invitation to keep speaking. And then the moment came, the one that has a way of making time thin and crystal clear. He stood, and for a heartbeat, I thought he might leave. Instead, he came a little closer and placed the paper back into my hands. He lowered his voice. "If you ever want company to the farmer's market, to church on Sundays, or to sit on the porch and talk about nothing at all, say the word. If you don't, I'll still be your neighbor. I promise." I was still frozen when he left the kitchen that day, not because I couldn't move, but because a whole landscape of small, delicate decisions had opened up like a book in my lap. The kettle forgot to whistle. The light shifted. Outside, life went on in its usual, gentle way, but inside, on that kitchen table with the chipped blue mug and a scrap of paper folded into a square, something tender and new had been placed between us. I folded the note and set it beside my tea. I pressed my fingertips to the paper as if to verify it was real, and then, finally, let the warmth of the cup seep into my palms. My heart felt like a room where a window had been opened, a clear, cold breeze bringing with it the scent of marigolds and dust, and the faint promise of rain. I did not know what the next day would bring. I only knew that I had been given a choice, and that for the first time in a long while, The idea of choosing felt like the most honest way to honor the life I had been living and the life that might still be ahead. If you're still with me, leave your city below. I read everyone. And when you're ready, I'll tell you what happened the next morning. How Donald fixed the porch light, and how I decided, in my slow, careful way, to speak back. The next morning, I woke to a kitchen that smelled of brewed coffee and warm sunlight slipping through the blinds. The note from Donald lay on the counter where I had left it, and I traced my fingers over the folds again, feeling the faint impressions of his handwriting. There's something strange about reading words written by someone who has dared to put their heart on the line. It feels like holding a tiny pulse, fragile and real. I hadn't slept well. My mind replayed the day before, Donald's careful steps into my kitchen, the way he'd spoken, the quiet gravity behind each word. And yet, despite the initial shock, there was a warmth too, a recognition that life could still surprise you, even at 55. My world had always been orderly, predictable. Meals, errands, the occasional bridge game or church luncheon. Donald had stirred something within me, something soft and unspoken. I sipped my tea slowly, watching the steam curl like smoke from a distant campfire. The sunlight caught the edges of the kitchen tiles, and I thought about how light could make ordinary things magical. A chipped mug, a folded note, a man standing in your kitchen telling you he loves you. The phone buzzed lightly on the counter. A message from my daughter, checking in, asking about plans for the weekend. I set it aside. Today felt like it belonged to me. A knock came at the door, the kind of knock that immediately makes you think of the person who belongs on the other side. Donald. I opened it, expecting the same careful, tentative energy as yesterday. He held a small toolbox in one hand and wore that familiar jacket, slightly wrinkled from sleep. His eyes, though, had the softest light I'd ever seen, as if he had rehearsed courage in the night and it had finally settled comfortably on his shoulders. "Good morning," he said, voice low and warm. I thought I'd start with the porch light, if that's all right. "It's fine," I said and stepped aside. Something in the way he carried himself made my chest tighten, anticipation mixed with a gentle ease. We moved outside together, and the morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and dew on the grass. He worked quietly, but I stayed nearby, pulling up a chair and watching, as if by proximity I could understand the rhythm of him. There was something profoundly comforting about seeing a man who was meticulous in his work, careful with his hands, yet capable of such raw honesty the day before. He glanced at me once and smiled. "You didn't have to stay inside," he said. "I didn't mind the company." I shook my head, smiling in return. I like watching. There's something reassuring about seeing someone take care of things. There was a pause, not awkward, but expectant. I realized then that yesterday's confession had left the air between us charged with possibility. The world didn't rush to fill it. Instead, it waited, letting us both breathe, letting our hearts settle into a rhythm neither of us had dared to name aloud yet. When the porch light was fixed, Donald wiped his hands on a cloth and turned to me. "It's done," he said simply. His eyes held mine longer than usual, and I felt the quiet weight of shared understanding. "You always make things seem so manageable," I said softly. "Even feelings that are hard to name." He chuckled, a sound like the first drop of rain on a dry sidewalk. "Maybe because I've been given good examples," he said. "And maybe because I didn't want to leave anything unsaid again. Life is too short for that." We stood there, the morning sun painting our shadows on the porch, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A connection that wasn't about obligation, or routine, or even nostalgia. It was something raw and deliberate, built on shared time, honesty, and the courage to speak without expectation. Later, back in the kitchen, we shared a second cup of tea. The conversation turned to lighter things, neighborhood gossip, the best spots for apple picking, the challenges of remembering where you put your glasses. Yet underneath the casual exchange was an unspoken current of intimacy, the way two people understand one another without needing to spell it out. At some point, he reached for the note I had folded and left on the counter. "Can I?" he asked. I nodded, feeling a flutter of something akin to anticipation and acceptance. He opened it carefully, scanning the words I'd traced the night before, words of acknowledgement, of tentative hope, of willingness to explore what had begun yesterday. He looked up at me with an expression I could only describe as reverent. "You don't have to rush anything," he said, "but I want to be part of whatever you're ready for, even if that means just sitting together like this." I felt a warmth spread through me, the recognition of a life that could still hold unexpected kindness, unexpected care, unexpected love. "I think I'd like that," I admitted softly. We spent the rest of the morning in quiet companionship. He helped with small chores, fixing a leaky faucet, straightening a crooked picture, and I followed along, offering occasional comments,